I never imagined my life would pivot so dramatically over one late-night email. But as I sat in my cramped flat overlooking the Thames, the city lights blurred through my tears, and I realized that quitting my six-figure consulting job was the easiest decision I'd ever made. My name is Alara Sinclair, and I was once the youngest senior consultant at Hawthorne & Reed, one of London's most prestigious strategy firms. I'd climbed every rung of the ladder faster than anyone could expect, fueled by ambition and an unwavering belief that success was measured in billable hours and quarterly bonuses. I spent years defending corporate restructurings that displaced entire workforces, and I learned to smile through dinner conversations while mentally drafting cost-cutting memos. My parents, proud immigrants from Belfast, hung my framed MBA diploma above the fireplace in our family home in Surrey, convinced their daughter would change the world from within boardrooms. But boardrooms eventually changed me. It happened one evening after a pitch meeting with a fintech startup promising to revolutionize rural banking in sub-Saharan Africa. They had genuine passion and profits that barely covered rent in Shoreditch. My CEO, Richard, sat at the end of the mahogany table, tapping his Mont Blanc pen and rolling his eyes at their earnest founder, a young mathematician with ink-stained hands and trembling confidence. "You're sacrificing margins for charity," Richard scoffed. "There's no place for sentiment in strategy." He turned to me. "Alara, run the numbers. If their ROI doesn't hit 25% by Q3, we walk." I did. And when I presented the data, the room burst into applause, until the founder's shoulders slumped and his eyes welled with defeat. I'd just delivered a verdict on his dream. That night, I drowned my guilt in whiskey and stared at my reflection in the glass, wondering how someone once driven to change the world ended up bulldozing it for profit. The next morning, I drafted my resignation. I didn't know where I'd go or what I'd do, but I knew I couldn't stay. I copied the email draft and stared at the blinking cursor. Doubts flooded in. How would I pay rent? My student loans? Worse, what would people think? I was tearing up the blueprint I'd worked my entire adult life to build. I pressed send. The shockwaves were immediate. Slack messages flooded in. "Alara, are you okay? Is this a joke? Come back, genius. Leadership needs you." Quote. My inbox screamed with pleas, but I ignored them. When I cleared my desk and exited the building for the last time, I felt an unexpected lightness, like shedding a coat that had grown too heavy to carry. For weeks I drifted. I walked along the South Bank at dawn, marveling at the quiet before the city's roar. I volunteered at a women's coding boot camp in Hackney, laughing as I struggled to debug Python scripts beside students half my age. I spent afternoons at cafes interviewing founders of mission-driven startups, absorbing every story of resilience and purpose. But reality crept in. Freelance consulting was unpredictable, and bills loomed. I applied to a handful of impact-driven organizations, but my resume, painted with corporate logos and profit metrics, felt alien to them. I was an outsider in both worlds. Then came the email. Subject: Opportunity at Verdant Ventures. The note arrived in my personal inbox one Tuesday morning. Verdant Ventures was a small private equity firm with a reputation for supporting sustainable agriculture projects across Europe. Their portfolio included everything from organic olive groves in Tuscany to vertical farms in Rotterdam. They didn't pay six figures, and they didn't ship me to exotic locales in business class. But their founder, Magdalena Russo, was a legend in her own right, a former Wall Street analyst who'd walked away from bonus culture to build something that mattered. Magdalena's email was concise. "Your approach to ethical strategy caught my eye. I'm building a board for Verdant that balances financial acumen with social impact. I'd like to discuss your potential role." My heart hammered as I read and reread her words. I scheduled a call immediately. Our conversation was electric. She spoke of her vision, a company where every investment prioritized planet and people alongside profit. When she asked why I walked away from Hawthorne and Reed, I found myself telling her the truth, that I'd sacrificed my own convictions for a paycheck and that I'd regret it for the rest of my life if I didn't change course now. By the time the call ended, I'd accepted her invitation to join Verdant's advisory council. The stipend was modest, but the mission was priceless. When I shared the news on LinkedIn, the reactions were brutal. Former colleagues mocked my step down. Industry peers labeled me naive. The hashtag sellout trended in the wrong circles. Every morning, I braced for another wave of criticism. My phone buzzed relentlessly with doubts. I hope you're ready to live on ramen. Good luck saving the world on a shoestring. But within those messages, something shifted. I stopped replying. Instead, I poured my energy into Verdant's projects. I rolled up my sleeves and dove into board meetings, where soil scientists argued with financial analysts. I negotiated deals for fair trade almond groves in Andalusia. I traveled to a seed bank in Prague to safeguard heirloom grains. Each step felt like reclaiming a piece of myself I had long neglected. Today, standing in a sunlit greenhouse outside Bristol, watching seedlings sprout beneath our sustainable irrigation systems, I realized I was exactly where I was meant to be. The boardroom had found me after all, but on different terms, shaped by purpose instead of profit. And this was only the beginning. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're from. If this story moves you, please subscribe. Tomorrow, I have a special story for you. The sun hadn't yet kissed the horizon when I stepped into Verdant Ventures' Bristol office for the first time as an official board member. The greenhouse behind me glowed with the promise of new life. Inside, the air was cool and tinged with the scent of damp soil and fresh seedlings. I paused by the entrance, smoothing the lapels of my fitted blazer, an old habit from the days I believed power was in the clothes, and took a steadying breath. Magdalena Russo greeted me at the reception desk, her hair a cascade of silver that framed a face both fierce and kind. Her eyes held the same steely determination I'd come to admire. "Welcome back, Alara," she said, extending a hand calloused from countless hands-on visits to our farms. "Ready to roll?" I smiled, letting the adrenaline wash away the remnants of doubt. More than ever. We walked through a corridor lined with framed photographs of Verdant's early ventures. Solar-powered greenhouses in Andalusia, community orchards in Devon, hydroponic towers in Copenhagen. Each image told a story of grit and grit alone, projects that almost fell apart when funding dried up, when droughts threatened yields, when local partners lost faith. Yet here they stood, monuments to the power of perseverance and shared vision. In the conference room, the board had already assembled. Half of them were financial veterans. Sharp suits, sharper tongues, used to talking profits and pivot tables. The other half were scientists and NGO directors who spoke in seed viability rates and community impact metrics. I felt the familiar tingle of imposter syndrome, but I pushed it aside. I was neither of those things. I was the bridge. The chair cleared his throat. Jeffrey Maddox, our finance lead, with his silver cufflinks and skeptical glare, scanned the room. "Let's call this meeting to order. We have several key decisions today: the Andalusian olive grove expansion, the Rotterdam vertical farm funding, and the new pilot program in rural Scotland. Ilara, since this is your second board meeting, would you start with the olive grove?" I swallowed as all eyes turned toward me. My throat felt dry, but I'd prepared. "Thank you, Jeffrey. The expansion project in Andalusia has the potential to double our yield within 18 months. But beyond that, it's critical we implement sustainable shade nets to protect the trees during the summer heat wave forecasts. I've consulted with Dr. Morales at the University of Granada." Murmurs rippled. Claudia, our impact director, nodded approvingly. Jeffrey's jaw clenched. "Shade nets will cut our IRR by 3% at best," he countered. "Is that acceptable?" I met his gaze. "If we don't safeguard the trees, we risk losing an entire season, and that's a 10% drop at minimum. The insurance cost for crop failure would far exceed the net investment." A flicker of respect passed over Jeffrey's face. He scribbled notes, then leaned back. "Proceed, but keep me posted on cost variances." The meeting pressed on, each agenda item a battleground of mindsets: profit versus purpose, efficiency versus ethics. When conversations shifted to Rotterdam, I found myself mediating between the hydroponic startup's visionary founder, who wanted to reinvest every penny into research, and our CFO, who demanded immediate revenue returns. I translated their dialects. He means he wants to phase in revenue targets over 3 years to fund R&D for nutrient optimization. You mean you need at least a 15% net margin by year 1? Can we structure a performance-based milestone that unlocks additional funding? By the time the meeting closed, dusk had settled outside, painting the glass walls in shades of purple. I felt both drained and exhilarated. Magdalena caught me in the hallway. "You handled yourself well," she said softly. I shrugged, unsure. I was terrified. She smiled. "Good. Fear shows you care. Now, let's celebrate." Quote. She led me to a rooftop terrace where the other board members mingled under string lights. Glasses of sparkling cider were passed around, and laughter echoed against the backdrop of rustling leaves. I found Claudia, who raised her glass, to the newcomer who isn't afraid to speak up. I clinked glasses and took a sip, letting the crisp sweetness ground me. As the evening wound down, I lingered by the edge of the terrace, staring out at the glittering cityscape. My phone buzzed with messages. Friends checking in, colleagues from Hawthorne and Reed sending thinly veiled jabs. Board meetings. Is the rent paid yet? Enjoy your artisanal cider. I tucked the phone into my pocket, smiling. I was no longer chasing approval from people who defined me by spreadsheets. My worth was measured by impact, by the seedlings that would grow into groves, by the communities empowered, by the ecosystems healed. The next morning, I would dive into our pilot in Scotland, highland barley fields at risk of soil erosion, local farmers wary of change. But for now, I stood under the night sky, convinced of one thing. I had found my tribe. And yet, just as I was beginning to feel at home, an email arrived that would challenge everything I'd built so far. The subject line read, "Urgent Compliance Audit Results." My heart sank as I opened it. My fingers trembled as I clicked open the attachment labeled, "Audit Findings." The email was from Verdant's Chief Compliance Officer, a stickler named Harrison Lee, whose hawk-like gaze I'd only glimpsed during our first annual compliance training. The subject, "Urgent Compliance Audit Results." I exhaled slowly and scrolled. My heart pounded as I read line after line. Discrepancies in financial reporting, missing documentation for 2 seed purchase contracts, irregular expense claims from a regional director, potential breaches of EU agricultural guidelines. The document ended with a stark warning. If these issues are not remediated within 14 days, Verdant Ventures will face regulatory fines, reputational damage, and possible suspension of our key projects. My mind raced. This was the nightmare I'd feared since joining, a compliance scandal that could unravel everything we'd built, and it was on me to lead the response. I closed my laptop and ran my hands through my hair. The terrace was empty now, the dawn light seeped through the glass, illuminating the tidy rows of seedlings behind me. I took a steadying breath. I needed a plan. I strode down the hallway to Harrison's office. The door was ajar, and I found him hunched over screens displaying spreadsheets and scanned contracts. He looked up, his thin lips pressed into a tight line. "Harrison, got a minute?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. He sighed. "I assume it's about the audit." I nodded. "Walk me through the most critical points." Over the next hour, Harrison laid out the issues. A mismatched invoice from our Andalusian partner, an unapproved travel expense for a Scottish field team, missing signatures on the Rotterdam hydroponic equipment lease. Each item seemed small on its own, but in aggregate they painted a portrait of sloppy governance. "Verdant's board has to act fast," he said. "The European Commission is cracking down on agricultural investors. They'll audit grant claims, subsidy usage, everything." I nodded, my mind already mapping solutions. "Let me convene an emergency board meeting," I said. "We need to establish a remediation task force and delegate responsibilities." His eyes widened. "You're on fire this morning." By mid-afternoon, I had pulled together a special session. I sent invites to every board member, to include our CFO, legal counsel, operations leads, and external auditors. The meeting was set for 48 hours later, no room for delay. As I drafted the agenda, my phone buzzed with a LinkedIn notification. Another jab from an old colleague. "Audit? Heard you're finally learning rules matter." I deleted it without reading. I focused on Verdant. Over the next 2 days, I pored over contracts, reassembled invoices, and reached out to regional offices for missing signatures. I worked alongside our finance team late into the night, cross-referencing purchase orders and expense reports. I felt the familiar adrenaline rush of a crisis, but this time it was different. This wasn't about maximizing margins. It was about safeguarding our mission. The morning of the emergency meeting arrived. I entered the boardroom carrying a stack of binders. The room was silent, tension crackling in the air. Magdalena took one look at my determined expression and nodded. I cleared my throat. Thank you all for joining on short notice. We're facing a serious compliance issue that threatens our portfolio. I've outlined the main points and proposed a remediation plan. I launched into the details. I assigned the Andalusian invoice review to our finance director, Priya Sharma, the Scottish travel expenses to our operations lead, Tom Hunt, and I took personal ownership of the Rotterdam lease documentation. I proposed weekly check-ins until the European Commission's review window closed. As the meeting progressed, I could feel the board's initial skepticism melting into collaboration. Jeffrey Maddox, who'd been skeptical of my bold priorities, leaned forward. Your plan is thorough, Elara. I agree with your task force structure. Claudia added, this approach balances compliance rigor with operational continuity. We can't let this stall our projects. By the end, we'd ratified the plan unanimously. The board committed resources, additional legal support, audit tools, and a temporary freeze on non-essential expenses. I exhaled, feeling a surge of triumph. But the victory was short-lived. As the meeting adjourned, Magdalena pulled me aside. She looked grave. There's one more thing, she whispered. The Andalusian partner just notified us. They discovered a hidden clause in the original contract. It allows them to demand repayment of all advance payments if they deem the project mismanaged. They're threatening legal action. My chest tightened. Repayment would bankrupt that partnership, and maybe more. I braced myself. Show me the clause. She handed me a photocopy. My eyes scanned the fine print, a subparagraph buried beneath pages of boilerplate. It spelled disaster. I closed the folder slowly and looked up at her. Call them. I'm going to fix this. As I stormed out of the boardroom toward my office, my phone vibrated with an incoming call from an unknown number. I glanced at the screen. It was a blocked caller. I hesitated for a moment, then answered. The voice on the other end was cold and unfamiliar. Elara Sinclair? I swallowed. Yes. The voice paused, then said, If you want Verdant to survive, you'll do exactly as I say. My blood ran cold. I gripped the phone tighter, steeling myself. Who is this? No answer, just the breathy click of the line going dead. I stared at the silent phone. Everything I'd worked for, everything Verdant stood for, was on the brink. And now it seemed someone inside or outside was playing a far more dangerous game. I closed my eyes, trying to steady my racing thoughts. Whatever was coming next, I knew one thing. My boardroom was about to become a battlefield, and this time the enemy might be closer than I ever imagined. Higher. I pressed my back against the cool glass of my office window, listening to the fading dial tone. The London skyline before me was a glittering tapestry of normalcy, oblivious to the storm brewing within Verdant's walls. My pulse echoed in my ears as I dialed Magdalena's direct line. Magdalena, it's me, I began, voice steady despite the adrenaline. Behind me, the city seemed to hold its breath. Her familiar voice crackled on the line. Elara? What's happened? I swallowed. Our partner in Andalusia. They're invoking that hidden clause, demanding full repayment of advance payments. They're threatening legal action. A long pause. That clause wasn't supposed to be active, she whispered. I'll get legal on it. You handle the rest. I hung up and exhaled. There was no time to lose. I summoned Priya and Tom to my office, two of Verdant's most trusted lieutenants. Priya, our finance director, had the analytical mind of a chess grandmaster. Tom, operations lead, was a former Royal Marine with unwavering loyalty. They arrived within minutes, faces etched with concern. Explain, Priya said, closing the door. I laid out the audio threat and the clause ramifications. If they succeed, we risk not only losing our advance but triggering investor panic. We could see a domino effect. Funding dries up, projects stall, staff layoffs. Priya frowned. We need leverage. Any records of communications confirming clause was inactive? Only one person has those, Magdalena. She signed off on the initial contract. Tom leaned forward. Then we need her testimony on record, and legal needs to draft an injunction immediately. I nodded. But we also need a backup plan. If the legal route drags on, we must secure emergency funding lines, reach out to our sustainability bondholders for a bridge loan, and prepare a contingency communication for stakeholders. Be transparent but controlled. Priya tapped her tablet. I'll gather financial models and prepare a request for a €5 million line. Tom, coordinate with our legal team and the Andalusian office. They saluted and left. I stood by the window, mind racing. The pieces were moving, but by the time they were in place, we could already be underwater. I grabbed my coat and headed to the London offices of Silverleaf Legal, our firm of choice. The corridors smelled of leather-bound law books and espresso. I found Catherine O'Donnell, our partner specializing in agricultural contracts. Catherine, we need an injunction on the clause. Statutory interpretation, bad faith arguments, everything you've got. She looked up from a mountain of files. I'll have a draft by tonight. But to file, we need evidence that Verdant and our partner never intended the clause to be enforceable. I exhaled. Magdalena's signed communications will prove intent. Can you work with our team to pull the emails? She nodded. I'll liaise with your CFO. Back in the taxi, I called Magdalena. She answered immediately, voice tense. I found the emails, she said. Turns out our former in-house counsel flagged the clause as boilerplate error and recommended removal. I forwarded that to Madrid, twice. They ignored it. My shoulders relaxed slightly. That's enough for misrepresentation. I'll authorize the filings, and Alara, I'm sorry, I should have caught this. I forced a smile I didn't feel. We fix it together. At Verdant's office, I convened a cross-functional war room, finance, operations, legal, external PR. Whiteboards lined the walls with flowcharts and crisis timelines. I laid out the integrated plan. Legal injunction, emergency bridge loan, controlled stakeholder communications, and parallel compliance audit enhancements. As night fell, my team worked in synchronized precision. Priya negotiated terms with bondholders over speakerphone. Tom coordinated site managers in Spain and Scotland. By midnight, Catherine delivered the injunction paperwork to our Madrid contacts, demanding an immediate stay on repayment demands. My phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. My heart lurched. Another threat? But the message was simple. Clause enforcement halted. You win, for now. I couldn't tell if it was our legal team or someone watching inside Verdant. I stared at the text, a cold realization settling in. We'd bought time, but not safety. The real battle was just beginning. Tomorrow, the board would convene again to weigh in on our next moves. Investors would demand answers. And somewhere in the shadows, our adversary was planning their next strike. I ran my hand through my hair and sent a message to Magdalena. We're not just fighting a clause. We're fighting for the soul of Verdant. Her reply came almost instantly, and we'll win, together. I closed my eyes, drawing strength from her words. This boardroom was my battlefield, and I was ready. But the war would test every conviction I'd ever held, and only the fiercest will survive. The emergency board meeting convened at dawn, the air in the glass conference room thick with tension and anticipation. I stepped to the head of the table, heart pounding, as banners outside proclaimed the sunlit promise of a new day, ironically at odds with the storm inside. Magdalena's eyes met mine. She offered a curt nod, our silent signal that we were united. Across the table, Jeffrey cleared his throat, adjusting the cuffs of his crisp shirt. Priya sat poised with her laptop open, spreadsheets glowing like war maps. Tom stood at the back, arms folded, every bit the sentinel I'd come to rely on. Thank you all for coming on such short notice, I began, my voice steady but firm. We have critical decisions ahead. Securing our bridge financing, addressing investor concerns, and reinforcing governance to prevent future crises. But first, a hush fell. I inhaled, summoning every ounce of resolve. We need to reaffirm Verdant's mission in the eyes of our stakeholders. Today, we'll draft an open letter to our investors and partners, transparently outlining the challenges we faced, the actions we took, and our unwavering commitment to sustainable impact. Murmurs rippled around the table. Jeffrey's skepticism was evident. Open letter, he asked? That's risky. Admitting mistakes can trigger panic. I met his gaze. Transparency builds trust. Our investors chose Verdant because we stood for more than profit. They'll respect honesty if we frame it with accountability and forward momentum. He leaned back, considering. Fine, let's see a draft. We spent the next 2 hours crafting the letter, word by word, sentence by sentence. I insisted we lead with our core values: environmental stewardship, community empowerment, and ethical governance. We acknowledged the audit findings, explained the inadvertent clause oversight, and celebrated the rapid, coordinated response that prevented project disruption. We concluded with a reaffirmation of future initiatives and an invitation for dialogue. By the time we sent the letter to the legal and PR teams for final vetting, the room crackled with cautious optimism. Priya reported progress. Bondholders agreed to provisional funding pending board approval. Tom confirmed our legal injunction had temporarily frozen the Andalusian partners' demands. Magdalena allowed herself a rare smile. But victory was fleeting. My phone buzzed, a direct message from a Verdant email alias I didn't recognize. The subject, confidential, board vote. I opened it. The message was blunt. A group of investors is calling for a vote of no confidence in the current board, citing risk management failures. If you want to retain your positions, you must secure at least 60% approval within 48 hours. Signed, Anonymous Syndicate. Silence fell over the room as I read aloud. Hearts pounded, eyes darted. This was our next crucible. I squared my shoulders. We anticipate resistance, but we have faith in our mission and evidence of our leadership. I propose we hold an emergency virtual investor meeting, present our full action plan, and address concerns in real time. We must mobilize every advocate within our network and showcase our tangible impact metrics. Claudia, our impact director, chimed in. I can prepare a video montage of on-the-ground progress, farmers' testimonials, crop yield data, community improvements. Jeffrey nodded. I'll liaise with the CFOs of our largest investors to secure early commitments. Priya added, we need to share updated financial projections reflecting the bridge loan and injunction's impact. Clarity is key. Tom stood. I'll coordinate with our regional directors to ensure local teams are ready to field any questions. Transparency at every level. We divided tasks and set a tight timeline. As noon passed, I took a moment to step onto the terrace, the same rooftop where we'd once toasted our first successes. I gazed at the skyline and let the wind carry away my doubts. In those quiet seconds, I remembered why I chose this path. Not for status, nor for prestige, but for purpose. Verdant existed to change lives and landscapes, and I would fight to preserve its soul. The next 2 days blurred into a whirlwind of preparation. We scripted investor calls, rehearsed presentations, and fine-tuned our narrative. I spoke with Magdalena each night, her unwavering faith my anchor. When the virtual meeting began, more than 200 stakeholders logged in from across the globe. The opening slide displayed our mission statement, overlaid on images of thriving olive groves, bustling hydroponic towers, and smiling farmers. I guided them through our journey, the initial misstep, the decisive response, the legal victories, and the bridge financing secured at favorable terms. I paused at each milestone, inviting questions and fielding concerns with honesty and data. Then Claudia's video played, a montage of sun-drenched fields, villagers planting seeds, scientists monitoring soil health, and executives hugging the local community leaders. The testimonials spoke of renewed hope and tangible results. Investor sentiment shifted visibly, chat boxes filled with supportive messages. By the time Jeffrey announced the vote, the outcome was clear. The tally confirmed our leadership, with 78% reaffirming confidence. Applause emojis flooded the chat. I exhaled, relief washing over me. We had endured the trial by fire and emerged stronger. Back in the conference room, Magdalena embraced me. "You did it," she whispered. I shook my head, tears of triumph in my eyes. We did it, together. But as celebrations erupted, a single email notification stole my attention, from the blocked number that threatened me. The subject read, "Next move, investigation." My stomach twisted. The war for Verdant's future was far from over. My breath caught as I opened the email marked, "Next move, investigation." The message was as chilling as the winter wind rattling against my office window. No signature, no explanation. Only a promise of deeper scrutiny. My fingers hovered over the keyboard as the implications unfurled in my mind. Who was watching us so closely? And what skeletons in our closet were they ready to expose? I closed my laptop with a decisive snap and turned to face the granite conference room table where the aftermath of our investor victory still lingered. The boardroom looked deceptively calm, magazines neatly stacked, half-empty coffee cups forgotten at the corners, but the air was thick with unspoken questions. I gathered Magdalena, Jeffrey, Priya, Tom, and Claudia in a private huddle just outside the main doors. "We just survived a vote of confidence," I began, voice low but firm. "Now someone is probing deeper. We don't know their identity or motives, but we must assume they have access to privileged information. It's time to mount a proactive defense." Priya frowned. "Our compliance audit made us stronger, but an external investigation could demand far more detailed records. Board minutes, email threads, third-party contracts. We need to lock down our document management and ensure every transaction is bulletproof." Claudia's eyes narrowed. "And our impact metrics will be under the microscope too. If any of our community partnerships or sustainability claims are challenged, our reputation could be irreparably damaged." Tom tapped his phone. "I'll secure our regional teams. No one speaks to the press or legal inquiries without clearance. We're enforcing a media blackout until we know more." Magdalena placed a comforting hand on my arm. "We've weathered storms before. This is another test of Verdant's resilience. We'll face it together." I nodded, drawing strength from their solidarity. First order of business, immediate forensic review. I want an external audit team on site in our London HQ and all project locations. They will catalog every data point, every signature, every euro spent. Priya, coordinate with our bondholders to cover the cost. Consider it an investment in our integrity. Priya tapped notes on her tablet. "Understood." "Second," I continued, "our communications strategy must shift. We'll issue a controlled public statement acknowledging the inquiry and emphasizing our ongoing cooperation with authorities. Transparency remains our strongest asset." Jeffrey exhaled. "I'll draft the statement and run it by Catherine at Silverleaf." I glanced at the cloud-dappled sky through the glass wall. Beyond it lay verdant fields and greenhouses humming with life, symbols of all we stood for. But inside, entropy threatened to unravel our work. "Prepare for questions," I said. "They'll want to grill us on every detail. I expect each of you to have your responses ready. We cannot show hesitation." The huddle dispersed, determination etched on each face. As I walked back to my office, my mind replayed the warning. Next move, investigation. It was a chess game played at high stakes, with Verdant's future as the prize. I sat at my desk, hands clasped, and drafted the first lines of our public statement. Then I picked up the phone and called Harrison Lee. "Harrison, assemble your compliance team," I instructed. "We start the forensic audit this afternoon. And reach out to the external firm, Greenfield Forensics. I want specialists on agricultural finance." He confirmed and hung up. The die was cast. Hours later, the first auditor from Greenfield arrived, stern, clipboard in hand, eyes scanning the office with clinical precision. As she introduced herself, I couldn't shake the feeling that each pen stroke, each verified line item, was another step toward either salvation or ruin. Night fell again, and I lingered in the empty conference room, reviewing decades' worth of contracts and emails. The kind of documents I once blitzed through in a corporate career. But now, every comma, every footnote held the power to define Verdant's legacy. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling leaves against the glass, as though heralding the next wave of challenges. I rose, smoothing the front of my blazer. "Bring it on," I murmured into the silence. "We'll show them exactly who we are." And so the investigation began, an uphill battle across legal, financial, and moral terrains. Each dawn would bring a new challenge, a whistleblower tip, an unexpected subpoena, or a damning media leak. But in that moment, bathed in the glow of desk lamps and determination, I made a silent vow. Verdant would not merely survive this storm, it would flourish beyond it. Our values, our vision, and our unwavering belief in sustainable impact would be our guiding stars. And I would lead us there, come what may. Dawn light filtered through the blinds as I walked into the Verdant headquarters, my footsteps echoing in the cavernous foyer. The investigation had tightened its grip over the past 24 hours. Every email, every invoice, every board minute scrutinized under microscopes of suspicion. Reports from Greenfield Forensics lay neatly on my desk, each marked with red flags where compliance gaps still lingered. Magdalena met me at the entrance, her expression grave. "They've requested access to our personal communications. Emails, texts, voice logs. It's unprecedented." Her voice trembled on the edge between anger and fear. I drew in a slow breath. "Then we need to set clear boundaries. We'll provide what's legally required, nothing more. And we'll prepare for a public pushback." She nodded, and together we ascended to the boardroom. Inside, Jeffrey, Priya, Tom, and Claudia were already seated, their faces illuminated by the glow of laptops. "Update us," I said, taking my place at the head of the table. Priya leaned forward. "Greenfield's initial audit found 2 minor discrepancies in our Rotterdam funding allocations, less than 0.5% of total revenues. They flagged it as human error, not fraud, but they're calling it evidence of systemic oversight failures." Claudia interjected. "They're also questioning our impact metrics. They claim some community partnerships weren't formally documented, which undermines our sustainability claims." Quote. Tom added, "And legal is pushing back on our request to limit scope. The investigating authority insists on full transparency, or they'll escalate to a broader tribunal." Silence settled as the weight of their words sank in. This wasn't just an audit, it was an existential threat. I stood and paced slowly. We need a 2-pronged strategy. Legally, we negotiate scope and guard our proprietary data. For impact, we immediately formalize any undocumented partnerships and release an updated impact report certified by a third party. Jeffrey nodded slowly. "We can engage an independent NGO to co-sign our impact metrics. That buys credibility." Claudia's eyes brightened. "I know an organization in Geneva. They specialize in sustainable agriculture certifications. I'll reach out today." Tom folded his arms. "I'll ensure regional teams have documentation ready. No more oversights." I exhaled. "Good. Priya, draft an amendment to our data sharing agreement limiting requester access to non-proprietary materials. Legal will present it as a concession but with firm boundaries." She tapped her pen against her notebook. "On it." Magdalena placed a hand on my shoulder. "You're the calm in this storm, Alara." I swallowed, tapping into reserves of steely resolve. "This storm tests our conviction, but Verdant's mission isn't negotiable. We defend it at any cost." The meeting adjourned with renewed purpose. As I stepped into the corridor, I passed the greenhouse doors ajar, seedlings basking in the morning light. Their quiet resilience reminded me why I refused to yield. But as I turned to leave, my phone buzzed with a text from the blocked number that had haunted me since Part 3. "This isn't about documents. It's about loyalty. Prove it." My heart clenched. The investigation wasn't only testing Verdant's integrity, it was testing mine. And now, there was no turning back. The sun had barely broken through the clouds when I arrived at Verdant's Brussels office, summoned by the investigating authorities liaison. My palms sweated as I stepped into the austere, marble-lined corridor of the European Agricultural Commission headquarters. The weight of every step echoed that ominous text, "Prove your loyalty." I was led into a conference room, where 2 stern officials sat behind a long table strewn with folders. "Miss Sinclair," began the taller one, his tone curt, "we appreciate your cooperation. Today, we require full disclosure of Verdant's executive communications regarding the Andalusian contract. We have reason to believe there were internal discussions about bypassing compliance protocols. My heart pounded. I steadied my voice. You have copies of all board minutes and audit reports. Those documents reflect our processes. Are there specific communications missing? The official slid a manila folder across to me. This transcript from an internal meeting was omitted from your submission. Care to explain? A chill ran through me as I opened the folder. The transcript detailed a private strategy session, my suggestion to prioritize rapid project rollout, even if documentation lagged behind, to seize market opportunities. It was tactical, not malicious, but it painted us in a reckless light. I took a breath. That meeting was held before I discovered the compliance gaps. We were prototyping our expansion plan. I never intended to override protocols. Once the audit flagged issues, I halted all rollouts until we completed the forensic review. They exchanged glances. We will verify your claim. Additionally, we've received an anonymous whistleblower report alleging Verdant manipulated local community agreements for favorable PR metrics. Do you have a response? Claudia's voice echoed in my mind. Always have the impact data ready. I reached into my briefcase and produced the signed community consent forms, time-stamped videos, and third-party verification letters from Geneva's certification body. I set the documents on the table. We operate with full community consent, no manipulations. Here is the evidence. The officials reviewed the packets in silence. Minutes stretched like hours. Finally, the taller one looked up. We will need to corroborate these details on site. An inspection team will visit Andalusia and Rotterdam. I nodded, suppressing the urge to plead for mercy. You'll have our full cooperation. We'll facilitate every step. As I left the building, relief and dread warred within me. We had dodged one bullet, only to face another. Back at Verdant HQ, I convened the crisis team. Next week, inspection teams in Spain and the Netherlands. We need flawless preparation, site tours, document archives, community meetings. Tom's expression hardened. We'll mobilize regional directors and legal to ensure everything is in place. Priya added, I'll secure translation services for all documentation. No room for misinterpretation. Quote, Claudia pulled up her tablet. I'm scheduling community forums where inspectors can hear testimonials directly from farmers and local leaders. We mapped out a detailed action plan on the whiteboard, each task a defensive bulwark against potential allegations. That evening, as I reviewed the itinerary for the inspection, a notification pinged on my phone. Another text from the blocked number. See you on the ground. My blood ran cold. Someone was shadowing our every move. They weren't content with boardroom battles. They wanted to corner us in the fields, in the heart of our work. I stared at the message under the soft glow of my desk lamp, the seedlings behind me casting elongated shadows on the walls. The investigation had morphed into a relentless siege, legal, financial, and now personal. But Verdant's roots ran deep, and so did my resolve. I typed a single reply, Bring it. The early morning air in Seville carried the hum of activity as I stepped off the charter flight, determination anchored in every stride. Verdant's Andalusian olive groves lay just beyond the city, rows of silver-green leaves stretching toward the Mediterranean sun. But today, they felt like a stage under the watchful eyes of regulatory inspectors. Tom Hunt and I met our delegation at the private airstrip. 3 officials from the European Agricultural Commission, flanked by 2 stern auditors from Greenfield Forensics. Cameras and notepads at the ready, they exuded an air of authority. I offered calm courtesy, though my pulse raced. Welcome to Andalusia, I said, extending a hand to the lead inspector, Dr. Isabel Serrano, whose sharp gaze missed nothing. We appreciate your visit. She nodded curtly. Miss Sinclair, we have several areas of concern. The invoicing discrepancies, missing compliance signatures, and community partnership documentation. We'd like to start with a site walkthrough. I inclined my head. Of course. Follow me. The auditors trailed behind as we navigated winding dirt paths to the heart of the grove. Olive trees, decades old, stood sentinel beside younger saplings funded in Verdant's expansion. As we walked, I narrated the life cycle of our investment. Soil preparation, drip irrigation installation, sustainable shade netting, and organic harvest protocols. Dr. Serrano paused, plucking a leaf from a low branch. "Tell me about these nets," she asked, examining the fabric. I explained our decision to invest in biodegradable shade nets to protect saplings from extreme heat, a measure Jeffrey Maddox once resisted. "This aligns with our mission to balance productivity with environmental care." She scribbled notes. "Proceed. But we'll need verification of net composition and disposal records." Tom handed her a binder. Technical specifications, vendor invoices, and disposal logs. Every page had been meticulously compiled overnight. The auditors nodded, moving on to the central processing facility where olives were milled into premium organic oil. We ducked under low-hanging beams as machines hummed, sacks of cured fruit lining conveyor belts. I introduced the facility manager, Celia Ramos, a local agronomist whose team oversaw quality control. Celia demonstrated the lab-grade testing of oil acidity levels and antioxidant content. Dr. Serrano dipped a small sample into a sterile vial. "Excellent traceability," she noted. "But where are the quality test logs for Q3 last year?" My heart skipped. That quarter spanned the period before our forensic audit, when documentation had gaps. I handed Celia my phone, where I'd kept digital backups. "Here are the scanned logs, authenticated by blockchain timestamp." Dr. Serrano's eyes narrowed. She tapped her pen. "This blockchain solution is innovative. We'll verify with your tech partner." Relief surged as we moved through each inspection point. Soil sensors in experimental plots, community training sessions at the local co-op, water usage gauges tied to our sustainable irrigation systems. At each step, I presented evidence: signed attendance sheets, data exports, and GPS-tagged photos. But just as I thought we were in clear territory, Celia turned a corner and froze. "Miss Sinclair, you need to see this." She led us to a secluded grove where dozens of younger olive saplings stood wilting. The shade nets were shredded, roots exposed, brown patches dotted the earth. Tom's jaw clenched. "That's sabotage. These nets were intact yesterday." Dr. Serrano knelt, scanning the scene. "Evidence of tampering. Is this part of Verdant's operations?" I knelt beside her, studying the torn edges. "No, we followed all protocols. Someone deliberately damaged the nets and cut data cables for our soil moisture sensors." She activated her radio. "Secure the perimeter. Forensics team to the scene." Then she rose, addressing me. "This changes things. Vandalism suggests external interference." Quote. I swallowed. "Or internal." Back at the temporary command center, a repurposed barn, Tom reviewed CCTV footage from a night vision camera placed for security. Shadows flitted across the grove at 2 a.m. A figure moved among the trees, hands gloved, wielding a blade. The silhouette halted at the camera's gaze, then retreated into darkness. Claudia joined us via video call from Rotterdam. The same happened at our vertical farm prototype. Late-night entrants cut sensor lines and scribbled graffiti accusing Verdant of profiteering. A sinister pattern emerged, a coordinated smear and sabotage campaign. Regional teams faced fear and uncertainty. Farmers asked if Verdant's presence was worth the risk. I took a breath. "We must reassure them. I'll address the community directly." I instructed local project leads to convene a town hall. No inspectors allowed. Just Verdant's team, farmers, and myself. That evening, under a canopy of lanterns in a nearby village square, I stood before a circle of wary faces. Children played at the edges. Elders watched from benches. "I stand here as your partner," I began, voice echoing. "These acts of sabotage are meant to break our spirit and undermine our mission. But Verdant is not just a company. It's a community. We will repair what's been damaged, reinforce security, and stand with you. Together, we will continue to grow these groves into symbols of resilience and hope." Murmurs of assent rippled through the crowd. A farmer named Antonio stepped forward, wiping his calloused hands on his trousers. "We believe in you, Miss Sinclair. We stand with Verdant." The tension eased. Unity blossomed anew. But as lanterns flickered and the village sang traditional Andalusian folk tunes, I couldn't shake the knowledge that our adversary was still out there, preparing their next move. My phone buzzed with an encrypted message. "Well done. but you haven't seen anything yet. Enjoy the quiet while it lasts. I slipped the phone into my pocket, gaze lifting to the stars above olive branches. The night was calm, but the war had only just entered its most dangerous phase. The dawn mist clung to the glass towers of Rotterdam's Mariniterrane district, where our vertical farm prototype stood like a gleaming beacon of Verdant's vision. I arrived before sunrise, accompanied by Claudia and our lead hydroponics engineer, Soren Vandermeer. The air was crisp, with sea salt and urban energy, a sharp contrast to the quiet olive groves we'd left in Andalusia. Behind the tinted windows, rows of lettuce and microgreens glowed under LED lights, suspended in towers that seemed to defy gravity. It was here that technology met tradition, an emblem of Verdant's ambition to feed cities sustainably. Claudia adjusted her scarf, eyes scanning our surroundings. "Inspection starts in an hour," she said, her voice taut. "Dr. Peterson from the Dutch Food Authority is leading today's audit. They're keen on verifying our nutrient solution protocols and environmental controls." I nodded, steadying myself. "We've prepared every data log and maintenance record. Let's show them why Verdant is a model of innovation and integrity." Inside the control room, Soren guided us to a touchscreen panel displaying real-time metrics, pH levels, nutrient concentrations, humidity, and temperature. "This system is calibrated daily," he explained, tapping charts. "We use closed-loop monitoring to minimize water waste, each droplet recycled up to 30 times. Claudia smiled. "Impressive specs, but they'll want documentary evidence." Before we could continue, a sharp knock sounded at the door. Soren's face paled. "That's them." Dr. Marieke Peterson and her team entered, clipboard in hand, eyes sharp behind rimless glasses. She extended a hand. "Ms. Sinclair, thank you for accommodating us. I trust we can begin with an overview of your nutrient solution preparations?" I gestured to a small lab adjacent to the control room. "Right this way. We'll start there." We followed her to a stainless steel bench where beakers and digital scales lay arranged with precision. Soren demonstrated each step, measuring ionic concentrations, mixing organic fertilizer blends, and validating microbial inoculants. He transferred samples into vials and placed them under a spectrophotometer. Dr. Peterson examined the logs on a tablet. "Your recorded deviations are minimal. However, I noticed an unexplained spike in nitrogen levels 2 weeks ago. Care to explain?" My stomach tightened. I exchanged a glance with Claudia. That spike coincided with the trial of a new biofertilizer from our partner in Copenhagen. We intentionally increased nitrogen to test yield impact, but I apologize. We should have documented the experimental protocol more clearly. Dr. Peterson tapped her stylus against the screen. "Unrecorded experiments can jeopardize food safety certifications. We'll note this as a procedural lapse." I nodded. "We'll update the protocol logs immediately and provide batch analysis reports within the hour." She nodded curtly and led us to the next station, water reclamation. Layers of filtration membranes and UV chambers processed gray water from the farm. "Here, we ensure zero discharge into the harbor," I explained proudly. Dr. Peterson watched as the reclaimed water passed testing. "Excellent. Compliance there is above standard." She checked off items on her list and moved on to the software suite, our AI-driven growth optimization algorithm. In the server room, code scrolled across screens, adjusting lighting cycles based on leaf chlorophyll measurements. "This predictive model increases yield by 15%, Soren touted. "All algorithm changes are version-controlled and time-stamped." Dr. Peterson's lips curved into the ghost of a smile. "Well documented. I see you've learned from your audit setbacks in London." Just as relief began to bloom, Claudia's phone buzzed. She glanced down, her brow furrowing. I saw her lips whisper, "It's Antonio from Andalusia." Without missing a beat, she tapped a reply. Moments later, she looked up, grave. "Ilara. He says the farmers have encountered a fungus outbreak in the groves, spreading faster than our teams can contain. They blame irregular sprinkler system maintenance." My heart dropped. "Repair logs?" Claudia pulled up images. Withered leaves speckled with brown lesions, irrigation lines clogged with biofilm. The outbreak strains were isolated. Septoria something. Dr. Peterson watched. Interest peaked. Could this affect the oil quality tests we reviewed earlier? I swallowed. Potentially, but we can quarantine affected trees and adapt our processing schedule. We'll deliver updated lab reports immediately. She paused, then nodded. We'll reconvene once you provide those. Until then, consider this an open observation. She stood and left with her team, files in hand. Silence settled. The LED glow of the farm flickered softly around us. Claudia exhaled. This could threaten both our compliance status and community trust if the fungus reaches market stage. I clenched my fists. Tom needs to get to Andalusia immediately. I'll coordinate with our plant pathology partners and secure phytosanitary measures. Soren, document every irrigation event going forward. Every drop. We can't afford another data gap. Soren nodded. I'll integrate real-time alerts for any system deviations. Claudia brushed a strand of hair from her face. We should inform stakeholders, though carefully. The investors expect full transparency, but they also need confidence that we can manage crises. I reached for my phone. Draft a brief update. We'll schedule a press call for tomorrow. We frame it as a controlled protocol test rather than an outbreak. As we dispersed to our tasks, I took one last look at the vertical farm. Rows of vibrant greenery, now tinged with the threat of contamination. A silent reminder that innovation always came with risk. My phone buzzed again, a blocked number blinking. I glanced at the screen. A simple message. Garden is wilting. Ready for harvest? My blood ran cold. The message from the blocked number haunted me as I boarded the late-night flight from Rotterdam back to London. Garden is wilting. Ready for harvest? It had read. The ambiguity gnawed at my mind. Was our adversary taunting us about the fungal outbreak, or referring to something more insidious? When I landed at Heathrow's nearly deserted Terminal 5, the chill of the evening air slashed against my face. I summoned a cab, hands trembling, and instructed the driver to head straight to Verdant's central London office. I needed to get ahead of the crisis, to anticipate the next move in this shadow war. The office was dark when I arrived, the glow of my keycard activating the lights in the foyer. Upstairs, only the night shift team remained, a skeleton crew of IT specialists monitoring our digital security, and the on-call HR manager, Jean, who handled any urgent staffing issues. I found Jean by the espresso machine, bleary-eyed. We have a power outage in Andalusia, she said, voice hushed. Remote sensors show no data from 2 a.m. to 5 a.m. My heart sank. Any redundancy? She shook her head. Generators, but noise complaints from neighbors. Tests were halted. I cursed under my breath. That blackout allowed the fungus to spread unchecked. Get IT to reboot the backups and push emergency mobile sensor units out. I'm on the first flight back tomorrow morning. Jean nodded, fear flickering in her eyes. One more thing. Soren reported a breach attempt on our AI server in Rotterdam. Someone tried to inject malicious code into our growth optimization algorithm. My blood ran cold. This was no longer mere sabotage. It was a full-scale assault on Verdant's intellectual property. I sprinted to the IT control room, a mess of blinking servers and tangled cables. John, the lead sysadmin, looked up in surprise. Alara? It's past midnight. We've got an intrusion, I said, grabbing a chair and seating myself at the console. Shows as a remote exec command that tried to alter our predictive model. Did it succeed? John's eyes flicked across logs. No, we detected it and rolled back. But the attacker was sophisticated, had valid credentials. It wasn't an outside hack. They had a legit account. The room spun. Insider threat, I breathed. Lock down all privileged access. Require re-authentication for every commit and deploy a full audit of user activities. He nodded, fingers dancing across the keyboard. Will do. Exhausted, I left the IT room and wasted no time calling a secure video conference. I needed the full crisis task force. Magdalena, Priya, Tom, Claudia, and the heads of IT and legal. The bleached whiteboard in the small meeting room was already crammed with notes from earlier strategy sessions. Inspection response, community outreach, legal boundaries. Now we had a new agenda: internal security breach. Magdalena joined the call from her home office, face illuminated by screen glow. "We can't protect our farms and fields if we can't protect our data," she said. Priya chimed in, voice tight with concern. "Investor confidence will nosedive if they think our technology is compromised. We need immediate transparency, but calibrated." Claudia added, "Farmers need reassurance that our systems will run safely and uninterrupted." Tom's military bearing surfaced. "We treat this like an active threat. Secure all endpoints and rotate credentials, and we need to identify who has access." I exhaled, steeling myself. "I'll handle internal communications. We send a bulletin to every Verdant employee. No unauthorized system changes. Report anomalies immediately, and cooperate with the security audit teams." The meeting ended with a clear directive: lock down digital defenses and root out the insider threat. But I had another concern gnawing at me: the blocked messages. They hinted at someone close enough to monitor operations in real time, someone with access to both our physical and digital infrastructures. As I prepared to leave, John delivered one last blow. "Alara, HR flagged unusual login attempts from someone accessing the board portal overnight. The IP traces back to an address in Mayfair, registered to a shell company set up by one of our investors." My breath caught. This wasn't just one disgruntled ex-employee or rival agribusiness. This was orchestrated from the top. The very investors we'd fought to reassure now stood as potential traitors in our midst. I felt the weight of 1,000 decisions pressing down. Tomorrow's trip to Andalusia would have to wait. Instead, I had to prepare for a face-to-face confrontation with our board, and perhaps a reckoning with those we trusted most. I left the office in the early hours, the city lights flickering like distant, hopeful eyes. As I hailed another cab, I knew one thing. This battle for Verdant's soul was far from over, and the true test of loyalty was just beginning. The taxi wound through narrow Mayfair streets as dawn's pale light began to chase away the night's shadows. My mind raced. Investors, shell companies conspiring against us, insider credentials twisted into weapons, and Verdant's mission hanging by a thread. I checked the secure compartment of my clutch twice to ensure the encrypted USB drive was safe. That drive contained our most sensitive documents: board meeting minutes, forensic audit logs, and a full chronology of every blocked message that had plagued me since joining Verdant's board. When I stepped out of the cab, I was staring at the facade of Verdant's central London office. Its modern glass and steel exterior bore little hint of the war raging inside. Taking a deep breath, I swiped my keycard and entered a lobby that felt both familiar and alien. The tranquil potted plants, the soft hum of the air conditioning, they were all facades masking the chaos. I pressed the secure elevator button to the top floor, where the boardroom awaited. My phone vibrated with an encrypted message from Claudia. "All systems locked down. Preliminary audit in progress. We've traced the malicious code injection to a device connected to the executive parking garage network." I exhaled, steeling myself for what lay ahead. As the elevator doors slid open, I saw the long mahogany table surrounded by portraits of Verdant's founding members. Magdalena waited at the head, her face a mask of determination. Jeffrey sat to her right, eyes red from lack of sleep. Priya and Tom flanked them, poised for action. Behind them, 2 security officers stood guard. I closed the door behind me. Silence thickened the room. Magdalena broke the stillness. "Alara, thank you for joining us. We've convened an emergency session. We are investigating a coordinated insider attack against Verdant's data and operations, and it appears to originate from within our investor circle." A murmur spread among the assembled executives. Jeffrey leaned forward. "Credentials were used legitimately. Our system logs show API calls signed with board-level tokens. This isn't a hack. It's betrayal." I nodded, setting the USB drive on the table. "I have compiled the evidence. This drive contains time-stamped logs of every irregular access, network traffic captures, and a map of credential usage across our servers. It also includes copies of the blocked messages that match the timestamps of these incursions. Priya exhaled. If we can demonstrate that these investors provided access to our systems for malicious purposes, their fiduciary obligations are void. We can take legal action and freeze their shares. Magdalena's gaze sharpened. That's exactly what we need to do, but first, we must maintain operational stability. The Andalusian groves recover with emergency sensor units, the Rotterdam outbreak is contained with advanced antifungal treatments, and our online presence must reassure stakeholders. I spoke, voice unwavering. We need dual strategies: legal containment of the traders, and immediate damage control across all Verdant sites. I propose we form a special integrity council, distinct from the board, comprised of our most trusted directors and external advisors. They will oversee the transition, ensure compliance, and shore up our governance. Claudia nodded. I can reach out to the Geneva NGO, Sustainable Harvest International, to secure their oversight. Their endorsement will help restore trust. Tom said, we'll deploy a rapid response team to each field location, Andalusia, Rotterdam, and Scotland, to audit physical and digital systems in tandem. Jeffrey cleared his throat. And I will draft the legal filings to suspend the suspect investors' voting rights and seek injunctive relief against them. Magdalena turned to me. Ilara, you will head the Integrity Council. You have the vision and the resolve we need. Do you accept? My pulse hammered. I glanced at their faces, their trust, their hope, and felt the weight of every choice I'd made up to this moment. I drew in a breath and nodded. I accept. We'll rebuild Verdant's defenses, root out the corruption, and reaffirm our commitment to sustainable impact, no matter who stands in our way. As we stood, the first beams of sunlight pierced the boardroom's glass walls. It was a new day, and Verdant's true battle for its soul had only just begun. The Integrity Council convened at our remote Scottish pilot site, a repurposed barn overlooking rolling highland barley fields, marking a pivotal moment in Verdant's history. I arrived amid swirling mist, determination etched in my bones. With me, Magdalena, Jeffrey, Priya, Tom, Claudia, and 2 external advisors from Sustainable Harvest International Drive, Amina Zara, an agronomist, and Marcus LeBlanc, a governance expert. The council gathered around a long wooden table, maps and digital displays illuminating the room. Outside, the barley swayed like a restless sea. I began, "Thank you for answering our call. Verdant's integrity is under unprecedented threat, from plant pathogens to digital sabotage, and yes, betrayal within our own investor ranks. We are here to rebuild trust and secure our mission." Dr. Zara leaned forward. "We've reviewed the forensic reports. The fungicide protocols in Andalusia and the Rotterdam nutrient experiments need standardized documentation. We recommend unified digital logs and real-time monitoring dashboards accessible to the council." Priya nodded. "We've already begun integrating blockchain timestamping across all transactions. Next, we'll unify our ERP system with the lab and field data modules." Marcus interjected. "On governance, we propose a temporary freeze on board voting rights for suspects, pending legal adjudication. Simultaneously, we draft an amendment to Verdant's bylaws to strengthen fiduciary obligations and clarify revocation clauses." Jeffrey tapped his pen. "I filed for provisional injunctions. Now, we prepare for potential litigation in multiple jurisdictions, UK, NL, ES, so we need a harmonized strategy." Tom added, "Security teams deployed at each site will conduct overnight patrols and monitor network endpoints. We're also vetting every contract and vendor connection for anomalies." Suddenly, Claudia's phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen, eyes widening. "Ilara, you need to see this." Quote. On her screen, live satellite footage of our Scottish barley fields, bright green and lush, interrupted by a trail of discoloration crawling across the land like a spreading stain. I felt the room tilt. An outbreak. The messages from the blocked number echoed, "Harvest time." It wasn't just metaphorical. Someone was releasing a new biotic threat, an engineered pathogen, to sabotage Verdant's flagship pilot. We rose as one. There was no turning back. The Highland dawn broke cold and clear as I raced to the containment perimeter with the emergency response team. Verdant's Scottish pilot site had transformed overnight into a fortress. Razor wire fences, mobile decontamination units, and armed security guards. The engineered pathogen, codenamed Rust Reaper, moved quickly across the barley fields, leaving golden stalks blackened and brittle. Tom Hunt barked orders. Deploy the biocontrol drones. Amina, oversee the on-site genomic sequencers. Aim for rapid identification of the strain. We need a targeted countermeasure, synthetic endophytic bacteria to outcompete the pathogen. Dr. Amina Zahra hollered as she and her team rushed to portable labs. She clipped vials of infected samples and fed them into PCR machines. The digital display flickered. Base pair sequences cascaded in green. Time frame, 2 hours to isolate the effector proteins. I consulted my watch. 2 hours. Every second mattered. The council's remote communications assembled on my watch as data streamed in. Scanner readings from Andalusia showed no new outbreaks. Containment was working. Rotterdam's vertical farms were stable. But the Scottish fields were our flagship, the symbol of Verdant's innovative edge. If we lost this experiment, the entire mission could collapse. I activated my comms. Jeffrey, update on legal front. Injunctions against suspect investors are in motion? His voice crackled back. Signed and delivered, awaiting judge's approval. But digital signatures in ES and NL might slow us. I'm escalating to emergency procedures. Claudia joined via secured video link. Community defense units in Andalusia report increased morale. They're organizing volunteer patrols. We should replicate that spirit here. I nodded. Let's broadcast a rally call to our field teams. Coordinate security and solidarity. The hours blurred. Drones dispersed beneficial microbes. Security scanned fields under infrared. Amina's team iterated potential bacterial strains in closed-loop tests. At 10 a.m., the sequencer beeped. Pathogen profile identified. Amina's voice rang triumphant. This strain is a chimeric fusarium with a toxin gene insertion, likely from a private lab. But our candidate endophyte shows a 92% inhibition rate in vitro. Tom exhaled. Scale up the biocontrol spray. Within the hour, tanker trucks rolled through muddy lanes, dispersing the microbial consortium across the quarantine zones. We watched anxiously as drones snapped multispectral images. Brown blighted soil gradually tinged with green, the first sign of recovery. Relief rippled through the council's calm. But as dusk settled, an encrypted file arrived on my tablet. It bore the Verdant crest, but was signed with an unfamiliar, singular initials. MR. Opening it, my eyes widened. The document was a memorandum, detailing secret instructions to sow Rust Reaper in the Scottish fields, timed to coincide with board votes. And the author? Marcus LeBlanc, the governance expert from Sustainable Harvest International. I felt bile rise. Betrayal at the highest level. He had leveraged his advisory role to enact ecological sabotage and corporate coup simultaneously. I stood, voice trembling. They used the pathogen as cover for a hostile takeover. Marcus is the mastermind. Pandemonium erupted on the comm channel. Priya gasped. He had access to data and our trust. Claudia clenched her fists. We must confront him, and fast. I inhaled, eyes blazing with resolve. Council, we've exposed our adversary. Tonight we convene a virtual tribunal. Marcus LeBlanc will be tried in absentia, his counsel barred. We'll vote to expel him from the Integrity Council and revoke any associated advisory privileges. Tom's tone was steely. I'll coordinate with security to prepare for his possible flight. Magdalena's voice was calm but fierce. This is the final act. Verdant's future depends on swift justice. As night cloaked the highlands, I drafted the tribunal charges. Betrayal, attempted ecological warfare, corporate malfeasance. Evidence streamed beside me. Sequencer logs, drone imagery, legal injunctions. And for the first time since this ordeal began, I felt the tide turning. But I sensed another message incoming. The blocked number that had become my spectral ally and nemesis alike. My thumb hovered over the screen, bracing for its content. The line was silent, then popped. Judgment Day. See you at midnight. Quote, I swallowed, glancing at the containment fences under the moonlight. Midnight would determine whether Verdant survived, and if I could deliver on my promise to protect its soul. Midnight arrived with an eerie stillness, the Scottish winds whispering secrets through the barley fields. The Integrity Council gathered in a secure virtual chamber, faces lit by the glow of screens. Across time zones and continents, we prepared for the final act that would determine Verdant's fate. Dr. Amina Zahra and Marcus LeBlanc's empty seat loomed as a symbol of betrayal. Magdalena opened the session with solemn resolve. Tonight, we administer justice. We have irrefutable evidence of Mr. LeBlanc's sabotage and corporate conspiracy. I stood, voice ringing with authority. By the power vested in the Integrity Council, I call this tribunal to order. The charges against Marcus LeBlanc are ecological warfare, breach of fiduciary duty, and attempted hostile takeover. He will be tried in absentia. Our vote will decide his expulsion and the revocation of all his Verdant affiliations. The council voted unanimously. With a single click, his advisory privileges were stripped, and his shares frozen pending legal resolution. A sense of catharsis washed over us. Verdant's governance had prevailed. But celebration was brief. An urgent alert flashed. An unauthorized vessel was approaching the Scottish coast, carrying unknown armed individuals. A final push meant to reclaim control of the site. Tom took command. Security teams, converge on Beach Access Point 4. Evacuate all non-essential personnel and protect the containment zones at all costs. The battle that followed was a blur of rain-slicked fields, floodlights piercing the night, and the clash of determination against greed. Verdant's security and local volunteers, those brave farmers from Andalusia, the lab teams from Rotterdam, stood as one, repelling the intruders with unwavering resolve. As dawn crept over the horizon, the intruders retreated, captured by law enforcement called in by Jeffrey's rapid filings. The cost had been high. Minor damage to containment units, a handful of injuries, but Verdant's spirit remained unbroken. In the aftermath, I addressed the council one final time. We've weathered storms of compliance, sabotage, and betrayal. Verdant stands not because of a single leader, but because of our collective conviction in a mission greater than profit. Our future will be defined by resilience, transparency, and the communities we serve. Magdalena smiled, eyes glistening, to Verdant's next chapter. As I gazed over the repaired fields, the first green shoots of new growth sprouting through the blackened soil, I felt a profound sense of completion and renewal. This was more than a business. It was a legacy. 2 more great stories are next. Don't miss them. Subscribe and turn on notifications.